changed the whole attitude towards slavery. Wilberforce did a great job, but he did it. I was disturbed, or I was disappointed in the book and the movie Amazing Grace, because it gave no credit to Wesley and Whitefield and others that laid the spiritual foundation that allowed people like Wilberforce to get traction in the abolitionist movement. So what I'm beginning to see, and what is making some people at Westgate nervous right now, is that I think we've got to keep calling on God, believing that only God coming and reviving His church is going to change anything. But we've also got to be willing, like I've heard you say so often, to run for the Edmonds City Council, to put people into the Edmonds School District school board. We've got people here that need to be serving on the school board, so that we've got folks who are bold enough to speak the truth that you are talking about. So any assistance.
Which is, if you're uneasy about getting involved in these things, that's okay. That's understandable. And the fear is not of the Lord. And it says it 365 times in the Bible for a reason. Do not be afraid, once for every single day. It says it in Joshua 1, stand and be courageous. And then he says it again. And then he says it again. Stand and be courageous. By Joshua 1:9, he's repeated himself almost to a point where, like, okay, I get the point. So that fear, you're not the first person to be afraid. Let me just be very clear. And you have to pray, and it says in James 1:5, and one of my favorite verse in the whole Bible, which is to pray for wisdom and God will give it generously. So, wow, anything that God promises to give generously, we should take really seriously. So you should pray for that wisdom. Say, hey, am I called to just kind of do nothing in a moment like this? Or maybe I'm being called to just do a little bit to run for the Water Reclamation District Board or the mosquito abatement thing. But let's start there. Maybe this church should go take over the mosquito abatement board. Something, right? They decide something. And I'm being facetious, of course, because let's start with just something that's not as controversial. But what I'm getting at here, though, is what is the downside? Is the downside someone saying, oh, now you're political? Well, Aristotle said that politics is the highest form of community because it combines morality and sociability. We've really gotten that word politics is a negative word, but politics is really just values if you're thinking about it. All right, so just throw out Republican, Democrat. I'm a critic of both of them. Let's just forget all that stuff. And let's just say, like, what do we believe and why do we believe it? What are we willing to do, at least on the local level, to contest for those beliefs where it matters? And the school board's a great example. Because some of you might say, well, my kids don't go to these local schools. Well, you might fund them, but even if they don't, you should say, you know what, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make sure that correct history is taught in our schools. That critical race theory is not taught in our local schools. That you're not having graphic sex education taught to innocent children. That's something that should bother you. And so we should always try to impact government for God's purpose. Remember, counselor to the king, which is replicated time and time again throughout the scriptures. And if you don't know how to do it, that's okay. There's a lot of great organizations, ours included, that can show you how to make a positive difference. The problem is not the how, though. The problem is that gap that is missing, which is courage, which is saying that I'm willing to step out. So here's a good question. What is courage? We talk about it a lot. It's kind of a cliche. We need more courage in our country, right? Well, courage is doing the right thing when you don't know how it's going to work out. One of the reasons why we have a crisis in courage in our country is because the country has become so secular. Is that when the men that were storming Normandy Beach, almost every single one of them, according to historians, was praying, was in contact with their Creator. And that was an act of absolute courage. By the way, they were going and invading a distant country halfway around the world to abolish an evil that was not directly impacting American citizens. What do you think about that? I'm not asking you to storm Normandy Beach. Let me be very clear. But again, we are living on the coattails of that greatest generation. that went so above and beyond to create the modern world where we have the luxury to even have to debate this. Like, oh, should we get involved? Should we get engaged? You know how lucky we are even to have that discussion? This little snapshot that we can gather. And so, I understand it because we have grown up, myself included, with the best that America has to offer. Where we get stressed and upset when the Seahawks don't win. When we live lives of luxury, we have more plastic stuff than we know what to do with in our homes. When our concern is not starvation, but getting overweight and obesity. I get it. But now all of a sudden, for the first time, this life of luxury that we have enjoyed is all of a sudden being put not just in jeopardy, but a different type of America is starting to set in. And so that's where the church has to rise up. And I want to encourage you guys though. I'm going to tell you about a couple of churches across the country that have decided to take bold steps like this and what's happening. I'll tell you about one. Pastor Rob McCoy, my pastor, Calvary Chapel Godspeed in Thousand Oaks, California. Do you think this place is tough? Try going to Thousand Oaks, California, and do something meaningful. Rob McCoy ran for mayor as a pastor of a church. He won. He was the mayor during the baseline shooting when 9 people in his community and 2 of his congregants were shot senselessly. But that community needed a pastor at that moment to be mayor of that city. And hundreds of people dedicated their lives to the Lord because the pastor decided to go become a mayor of a local city. Then all of a sudden he decided to get his congregation even more mobilized and active, and last year they said the church is not essential. So he says, well, you're going to have to come arrest me. He opened up his church, no social distance, no mask, nothing, May 1st of last year. And he'd been sued by the county, criminalized, followed through the streets. Well, just last week, Ventura County dropped their lawsuit against Rob McCoy. They said, listen, I can preach a church down to a manageable size. That's his terms, not his. They were a church of 400 people. They're now busting at the seams at 3,500 to 4,000 people. How about Jack Hibbs, Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills? Speaks out on these issues, very similar to you, having these types of forums. They're getting 10 to 12,000 people a weekend. Their tithes, their offerings are through the roof. I can tell about Ken Graves in Bangor, Maine, Calvary Chapel out there, being criminalized by the governor, under attack. They're suing, and their lawsuit's probably going to be taken up by the U.S. Supreme Court. You and I are kind of following that together. Their church is busting at the seams. I did 3 services with them this last week. Cody Cool in Grand Rapids, Michigan. A great church out there, opened up fully, and everyone came down, and they were always struggling to fill one service. Now they've added a 3rd service of 500 people at every single service. What I'm getting at here is that the Lord will bless you when you take public, courageous stances in this time. The Lord will bless you. I got more examples. I can keep going. Yeah. And this church too.
We're sort of at a pivotal point here at Westgate on this just being very candid, and a lot of Westgate folks out here